Rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran over the last several months have revived tensions and fears of a potential military conflict. The Trump administration blamed Iran for June attack on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. And before that, the president pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposed new economic sanctions. But the possibility of a military strike on Iran has lingered for more than a decade. During the George W. Bush and the Obama administrations, the U.S. and Israel both considered action. A recent New York Times Magazine feature explores that history and what might come next. Ronen Bergman is a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine and one of the authors of that story. He also wrote the book Rise and Kill First, The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. And he joins me now from Washington. Ronen, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Rena. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. You know, we talk about tensions with Israel and Iran. We know that the Israeli government has been pushing for a strike for years. Where does that stand right now? And where do you feel like the U.S. will move when it comes to the Iran situation?
Well, in 2012, Israel was very, very close. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and at that time, the Minister of Defense, Ehud Barak, who is now one of the competitors against Prime Minister Netanyahu in the coming election next week, both of them thought that Israel should preemptively strike the Iranian nuclear sites, and they were very close, especially in July 2012, to do that. At that time, in the Oval Office was a president called Barack Obama, who exercised every pressure, every mean he could to prevent that from happening, and he did it. Now in the White House, there's a different president with a much closer relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and while Prime Minister Netanyahu continues to believe that he should have stricken in 2012 and told us in an interview for that story, the story that you just quoted by Mark Mazzetti and myself, he said, "I regret not striking in 2012. I thought it was the good thing to do, and the only thing that prevented me was American pressure or a lack of majority in cabinet." I believe that nowadays, if he decides to strike, he will find a different view at the White House. While President Obama was objecting that, President Trump, while not doing it himself, might endorse, maybe quietly endorse, Israeli strike and doing the job, what he believes to be the right thing, for the United States as well.
You know, President Trump really wants to have a sit-down with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Just a while ago, the Iranian Foreign Ministry put out that, talking about elections in Israel, that Netanyahu is trying to win by annexing parts of the West Bank and accusations against Iran. So, you know, Iranian people close to Rouhani, who I have spoken to, have said they don't fully trust a meeting with the president, that it'll lead to anything more than beyond a photo op. Do you get the sense that this meeting is going to happen? Do you see that? Where do you see that relationship between the White House and Iran going?
I think that there's a very, very strong likelihood that such a meeting will take place. In fact, Israeli intelligence believes that this is a fact, this is a given fact. It's already substantiated, possibly even scheduled, possibly to the UN security. So,
Ronen, tell me then, what do you think changed? Because 6 months ago, they had a very different tune on this. What do you think, if that meeting were to take place, now gives them optimism that they would get by sitting down? Is it the sanctions that's working?
The sanctions are working, but on the other hand, it seems that President Trump is very much, in favor of threatening to strike, but not in favor of doing that. Meaning, he called off the strike. He said that himself, and he, I believe, wants to declare that he brought peace upon earth like he did with North Korea and have a better deal according to him. But from the point of view of Israel, Israel fears that President Trump, while so anxious to have a deal, would not give enough attention to Israeli interest, and then this will put Israelis back to square one, to 2012, back to the dilemma, back to the deliberation whether they should strike Iran or not. Now, if Iran continues to do what it is doing now, which is walking away from the JCPOA, from the Iran nuclear agreement, and restart to enrich uranium, Israel will be thinking maybe Iran is crossing that red line, and Israel should act militarily, even without the U.S. support.
All right, Ronen, we're going to have to unfortunately leave it there. Ronen Bergman, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks, Ronen.
Thank you, Rina.